If you saw my video from a few weeks ago where I was preparing a sketchbook to make it less scary to work in, well, I've pretty much finished that one now. I'm not sure you ever actually really finish something like this. It's not a piece of artwork that's going to go on the wall or anything. It's more a place where I'm trying out ideas and having a bit of fun and spontaneity. There might be things that I'm not particularly happy about in here. Some things I like, some things I don't. But I've just been trying out lots of ideas. So I thought I'd talk you through some of the techniques I've used, and I'll intercut that with some close-ups of me doing some of it and tell you perhaps what my thought processes are on some of them, and that might help you to try something like this yourself. I seldom give my books a name, but because I'm thinking about doing some bigger pieces, textile pieces, based on this Cabinet of Curiosity idea, that's what I've called this book. And it's quite nice actually how to have a sort of front cover and put something on it. You could just put your name. So that's the front cover. That's just a layer of gesso, which is a very old sort of paint that people would actually prepare canvases with, but it's got this lovely sort of chalky finish, and it shows brush strokes well, which I rather like. And then I use some letter stamps, so that's not something of my own design. There's some stamps that I bought too, but I quite like the sort of randomness of that. And then I think I told you before that I reinforced the back cover and the front cover just because it's quite a flimsy book, and in fact it wasn't a good book to be doing this really, but I wanted something that didn't have too many pages, because the ones with sort of like hundreds of pages can be a little bit intimidating, but the actual paper quality wasn't that good. So that's why I kind of used different, probably more collage than I would normally, to kind of get away from that. And this is the front page. That's a photograph. This is a good tip. There are lots of websites and apps where they give you, I use one called Free Prints, and every month you can upload, I think it's about 40 pictures, and you have to pay for the postage, but the actual photographs are free. And I think the reason they do it like this is because you might want to get a larger one of one, and it's almost like a lost leader. The only proviso is that you can't like get 40 of one. They've all got to be different. But I find it's quite useful just to photograph almost, because this is actually an artwork of my own. But if you photograph your own artwork, then you can reuse it in your collage or your book. So that's quite a useful tip. And this was one, and I just picked up the background of this just using acrylic with some glaze, so it gives you that nice brushy look. And then this is another photograph, and this time I've tried to bed it into the page by using more gesso, and I use a lot of this acrylic matte medium, which is kind of acrylic paint without any colour in. It's sort of like the binder they use, and it's good for both glue and kind of finishing off a page if you've got something that's a little bit fugitive. If you've painted or drawn something and it might blur, or you might smudge it, you can just put a layer of that over it and it seals it, and then you can paint on top. So I use that a lot. And that's another photograph. I quite like the fact you've got a drawing of the Nautilus shell, and then you've got the actual shell underneath. If you haven't seen my last video, A Cabinet of Curiosities, if you haven't seen my last video, A Cabinet of Curiosity is something that was very popular from about the 17th century onwards, the sort of period of enlightenment when people got very interested in science and taxonomy, and rich people would travel and bring back lots of treasures, and they'd put them in, they were kind of collections first of all, but then later on they did actually become cabinets, and they could be all sorts of things. That's what's so wonderful about it as a subject for art, because you can just put anything in it you like. So they would put fossils. I've got ammonites and nautilus for my own tiny little cabinet of curiosity. I might show you that sometime. And feathers and shells, and there'd be plants, sort of dried leaves, and also sort of architectural details. Just everything in the sort of both the natural world and the made world that people found interesting and wanted to kind of collect and classify, kind of a way of sort of getting a handle on things and also sort of controlling things a bit. So that's the first page. And then this page I've used a transparency that I made ages ago for making cyanotypes with, because you can use that on the fabric and the sun will just go through the transparent bits. And I've mimicked that underneath. I had it printed out on paper as well, so I love using sort of bits of transparency. It gives you what's going to be behind that. And then these are some leaves that I've just done recently for some botanical printing, where you print directly from the leaves with a mordant, and the pigment transfers onto the paper or fabric. I just like the way those leaves mimic those leaves. And then this page I use a lot of tissue paper. I really like applying that as collage because it almost disappears. It does depend on the paper. You can see that this one, you can actually see some of the white of it, but these other one, and that one as well, but these two was a thinner sort, and it almost disappears when you, again, I've glued it on with the matte medium. And these drawings were done with a monoprint method, which I might show another time. Let me know if you're interested in that, where you just ink up a plate or piece of plastic and then draw very carefully and print from it. And I quite like the sort of botanical look of that. And then this one page I'm not terribly happy with. This was a sort of commercial wrapping paper that I'd kept from years ago, and I'd photocopied it. I like all the elements. I don't like the sort of, I decided to put everything on a diagonal, and I don't really like that. And I think the fact that it's sort of somebody else's artwork, there's nothing wrong with using found objects and things like that, but it's got a sort of static quality. I mean, what I do like about it is sort of black and white drawings against a background, and I think I might explore that, but with my own drawings. So I've learned something from it. And then I've used another transparency here and some more tissue paper with some prints of a moth called, I think it's called the Black Arches moth, and I have done a bit of, I'll put a picture in. I've got I wanted to make a thermofax print, which is this machine I've got where I can make my own sort of silkscreen type stencils, and I wanted to be able to do that on fabric. So, and once I've got the screen, let me show you. Once you've made the screen, I don't know how well this is going to show on camera because it's just a see-through image. You might be able to catch the... Once you've got it, as long as you look after it, you can use it again and again. And I have these on some tissue paper, and again, I like the black and white sort of graphic quality of that. I was thinking of going around the edges with a brighter colour so they stand out, but actually I'm quite liking it how it is. So that page is okay. And then this is me using some, as I said, there are often sort of architectural elements in these collections, and I had these, so you never throw anything away, because I did these honestly years ago. When I was doing a bit of work based on Venice after I'd been there on holiday, and I made these stencils and motifs of sort of quatrefoils, and that's done with a sort of resist. So you do a waxy crayon or pastel, and then put a wash either of watercolour or watered down acrylic on top, and you get a lovely resist. And I've used it in these other places. And then I just thought that element kind of went with it, even though that was done from a magazine page with the transfer. And then I made this, I'll put in a bit here, you'll see where I did this with a jelly print. And I'm quite pleased with how that came out. I think that was a window somewhere, I can't remember now. I could sort of draw around it, make it look more like a window, but I quite like how the sort of abstract pattern. And then you open, I've got lots of flaps because I'm thinking of cabinets and opening things and not revealing everything. So then I've put I've got another one of these which I made of an Amonite, and I just quite like the way that it echoes the one that I've done here. And then more of the quatrefoils. And then this next page, I haven't actually put any, I found it hard to sort of put some more detailed elements on it, and then I thought, well, maybe I don't need to. This was an old envelope. I like to use that because of having a transparency, and so you can see a butterfly through there on the next page. So it gives you a little bit of a sort of, oh, I wonder what I'm going to see when I turn over the page. So that gives you a kind of element of anticipation of what's going to be there when you open the page. But it was quite a flimsy bit of paper, so I had to reinforce it with a couple of lines of stitching. I talked about that a little bit more in the other video if you're interested. It's quite easy to do if you have a sewing machine, or if you haven't, you can do it by hand. Just make sure the needle that you use is one that you just keep for paper, because then it's not very good in fabric. So I don't know whether that does need anything there. I might leave it. It's good to not have every page really busy. And then so as you open, so you see the one butterfly there, and then as you turn the page, you see that there are lots of butterflies, and that obviously butterfly collections and drawers of them is a very familiar type of collection that people would do, particularly in Victorian times, when they'd go around with their butterfly nets catching and pinning them. You know, it seems quite bad to us now that are going round, and they'd actually sort of chloroform them, I think. But there were just so many more butterflies than there were now. It probably didn't seem, you know, they had a different attitude. Plus, I think there was just such plenty. Sadly, we don't have nearly as many around here now. And again, I've echoed, so that was a print of some butterflies, and then this was from that print I made a transparency that I was using for cyanotypes, but I quite like having the two elements there. And next I've got this beautiful nautilus shell that my lovely husband bought me as a present. Somebody knows you very well when they buy you weird things like that. Isn't it a beautiful thing? That's the inside. I must do some work on the inside, because it's probably something like the Fibonacci ratio or something, the way that the segments get bigger. But this is I just think it's such a beautiful object, and you'll sometimes see those in, I think Woodston might have them, in very rich collections of objects that the nautilus shells will be mounted in silver and sort of very elaborate settings. But I've done lots of sort of sketching with that, and which is why I've got it on tissue paper. And this was another, I think this was, no, that wasn't a photograph, that was done just a print out on my inkjet. And then I did, because there were some crosses on this piece, which was done with the monoprint technique that I was talking about earlier, I just decided to, I have a lino cut of this. I mean, it's such a simple shape, but I think it would be quite effective. So I put some stamps around there just to echo things on the other side. But it's quite nice and fun to play with sort of changes in scale. So you've got the large one there and the small one there. Just makes you see things differently. And then similar thing, but with my beautiful Ammonite. I think this was bought in Lyme Regis years ago. Isn't that stunning? And you get a lot of Ammonites and shells and fossils in these sort of collections. And again, I think that was, I scanned it in and played about with the colours. This was using the monoprint method. And then this page is looking at leaves. Again, I had this transparency, so I thought it'd be fun to actually print. So using jelly prints, I was it actual? Yes, I had some actual jelly prints of leaves, and I cut them to the shape so they would fit in there. And then I did another set on this side, slightly larger. And yeah, quite like that page. And then I tried actually gluing real objects into it, and actually that's worked pretty well. They again using the matte medium, and they're pretty well stuck on. You know, they might start detaching, but they look fine for now. Behind that, I've just got some writing on some tissue paper I had. I quite like using writing just for the sort of mark it makes rather than what it's saying. I mean, that was something from another project that isn't really pertinent to this, but I just liked it for the lines. And this was, I think this was left over from when I was doing some fabric painting, or using some fabric dyes directly on some fabric, and I just put paper underneath to sort of stop it going through, and I actually quite like the patterns there. So I did think, oh, should I put a print of a fern on that side? But as I was saying, I have this tendency to put a lot in, and I think sometimes just having space is quite good. And then, yes, kind of this is indicative in a way, because I'm not completely happy with this. It's a bit overworked. These little elements were from a long time ago when I was working on some sort of brooch designs to put into resin, which I don't think I might have done one or two, but such a long time ago. But I found that I had these printed out, all these circles, and they're such interesting little patterns. They're sort of, some of them are from sort of mathematical shapes and scientific instruments. I love looking at scientific instruments, and we're very lucky because I live near Oxford. There's a museum called the History of Science Museum, and it's full of the most amazing objects. I love that crossover between art and science, and I think, you know, some of the objects that are used for really important scientific work and breakthroughs, actually the people who made them also tried to make them aesthetically pleasing as well, and I really like that. And some of these are from my own designs. But I think that page is overworked. There's something interesting about the repeated pattern of the shapes. So, as I say, I'm sort of learning and trying things out. That was an old cyanotype. I just quite liked it because it echoed the colours. And then this is a page all about feathers and flight. That was an old plate, as you can see, another sort of scientific drawing, and I printed that out onto tissue paper. That was from a cyanotype where, obviously, using actual real feathers. Then I tried to do a jelly print here, and because this is the thicker paper on this side, it didn't work very well. So what I did was I did some drawing just to fill in the sort of spaces, not completely, but just so that gave you more of an impression of the feathers. And then I thought, oh, I've got some rather pretty feathers that I collected the other day. We've got lots of pheasants and partridges around us, which they breed and then go around shooting, which is, they call it a sport. I don't agree, but I found quite a sort of pile of feathers, and they're such pretty ones. And what I've done, I'll show this, is that I've just sort of stitched. I pierced four holes either side, and then did a sort of cross stitch. And I'm quite pleased with that. And they're not too thick that they don't make the book sort of bulk out too much. And just show you, you can see on this side, I haven't even finished off the thread. I think that's okay. I quite think that adds to the interest. So yeah, so this is a double page. I'd added these extra sections before I decided what I was going to do with it. But I had these drawings of large scale insects, which was, I did an online, I think it was during the pandemic, another museum in Oxford, the University Museum, was doing some online, it was really good, online workshops where they'd bring samples out of their collections, talk a bit about them, and then give you time to sketch them and paint them. And I really like the scale of these. I can't remember exactly what these ones were, but they were sort of particular species. And then this again, this is sort of using writing more as mark than as what it's saying. Although actually, it's from another project I did about a butterfly called the fritillary, about a butterfly called the Glanville fritillary, and it's actually a letter between a scientist and a naturalist about butterflies. So you can't really read any of it, and nobody would know that but me. But the fact that it's something about insects, and it's on a page about insects, rather pleases me. And I use this. This is before I got my own. I now have my own thermofax machine, which is a story in itself. You can, but you don't have to have your own. You don't have to be obsessive about it like me. There are companies that will make them for you. You just have to send online. You can just upload your own design and they'll send it back to you. So, and they usually come, whereas mine, I just put tape around them and keep them flexible. They usually come in a more rigid frame, which is probably makes them easier to use, especially for a larger one. But it's very good at picking up very fine lines, so that's why it works so well with sort of handwriting like this. So I've used that hundreds of times, and I never get bored with it. And then on the outside, first of all, I had, I think I started from these two kind of parchment papers where I'd done some tracing, and then I thought, oh, it would be fun to actually open up and then see the butterfly. And this is for some other work I did on the marbled white butterfly, which is quite a common one, but one of my favourites because it's so beautiful and graphic. And I quite like the sort of surprise element. So you sort of open up those bits, see the butterflies, and then you see more insects inside. So quite pleased with how that's turned out. And then Ammonites, more Ammonites. That was, I think I just printed that out from I scanned in on the scanner, scanned that in and then played about with it in Photoshop and came up with a design. And I've actually also, what have I done with it? I'm actually also working on I've digitised it to use on my embroidery machine. I'll show you that at the end. I'll have to dig it out. And that was a sketch from the same one. I quite like the looseness of that. That again is stuck on because, as I said, the paper itself wasn't that nice to actually draw on. And then this page, I just doesn't really have any meaning. I just liked, these were from a cyanotype that I'd made, and I just liked the different, again, I liked the different scale, the different size. And then I wanted to put use another stencil and put some grasses on, and you'll see here that it went a bit wrong. So I thought I'd share my mistakes and everything. I think there were two things. I think there was a little bit of wetness on the stencil itself, and then the little sort of foam thing that I often use as I haven't got it here now. I often use a sort of foam on the end of a stick you'll see that, to push the paint through, and that hadn't been completely rinsed out from the time before, so it kind of all went a bit smudgy. So I thought, oh, I'll just paint with the paint that's is, and then I went back afterwards. So I thought I'd just paint it because it was going to look really messy and not really work. And then I went back in, once that was dry, I went in with a darker colour and with both a dry stencil and I think I used a brush this time, and I quite like that effect. And then this page, this didn't really work. I had the writing on the back, and then I put some more tissue paper monoprints, but it's just a bit too busy, so that doesn't really work. This was quite fun. I've got these sort of proprietary stamps. I think it's fine to use things that you buy that somebody else has designed, as long as you use them in quite a creative way. So these are like rubber stamps, and I just liked the I like just using one of the, oh, that's the one I used. Yeah, that's the one I used. So I like the repeating symmetry of that. And then I thought, oh well, the fern leaves, I've managed to stick those in okay. I wonder if I can stick some grasses and dried flowers and things. And again, that seems to have worked really well. They're well stuck down, and I think that's something I'm going to. I think it's got lots of potential. And I think that's something I'm going to try again in another way. And then the last few pages, just some again. Print stencils, so more stencils of ferns. I love ferns, I love all the shapes. And then this was quite fun because I've got a painting of the outside of a shell, and then when I open it you can see the inside here, and I just quite like that. And then that was a collage I did of the same one, so I quite like the echoing shapes there. And then that's it. And then I just, again, this was some wrapping paper. I think I quite like the fact that the sort of typographical, and it echoes the one on the back as well. So there's some wrapping paper. I think I quite like the fact that the sort of typographical, and it echoes the one on the back as well. So there's a bit of a run through of everything, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll see you again soon in the studio or in the garden.